I still remember the smell of that morning, the soft scent of pine and old paper that floated through my window when the mailman stopped by. It's strange how scent carries memory more faithfully than time. I was sitting by the window, my hands wrapped around a chipped cup of tea, when I saw him slide an envelope through the slot. I didn't know that envelope carried 40 years of waiting, 40 years of breath I'd been holding without knowing why. My name is Nokomis. I'm 79 years old, though some mornings I feel like the same barefoot girl who once ran through the woods chasing after dreams that never came true. I've lived alone in this cabin for almost 2 decades now, a small wooden place by the lake, where silence feels like a second skin. It's not loneliness anymore. It's just quiet, the kind of quiet that remembers everything. That day when the letter came, I didn't rush to open it. I didn't even touch it for hours. I just stared at it, lying on the table, the sunlight warming the edges of its yellowed paper. I could feel it calling to me, whispering something from a time I thought was buried. The handwriting. Oh, I knew it. My heart knew it before my mind could even try to lie to me. It was his, Samuel's, the man I loved, the man I waited for, the man who left and never returned. 40 years I waited, not because I thought he'd come back, but because I couldn't stop hoping that maybe somewhere he still remembered me, that somewhere in some forgotten drawer or corner of his heart there was still a piece of me left. You see, Samuel wasn't just a man. He was the sound of summer laughter, the feel of wind on my hair, the one who called me songbird because I used to hum while cooking. We met when I was 20, in a town that no longer exists on most maps, a little trading town by the railroad, where the world felt new and promises felt unbreakable. He worked for the post office back then. Funny, isn't it? The man who delivered letters became the one who sent me my last one, after all these years. But back then, I didn't think about endings. We talked about beginnings. We planned to marry once he came back from his army service. He promised me he'd write every week. The first 2 letters came. Then silence. Weeks turned to months, months to years, and the silence grew louder. Everyone told me to move on. My mother said I was foolish to keep waiting. My friends stopped asking about him. They married, had children, and carried on. And me? I stayed by the window every morning waiting for the mail. 40 years. Seasons changed. Presidents changed. Even my reflection changed. But I still kept one drawer in my dresser empty, waiting for his letter, until that morning, the one that arrived too late. The postman, a young man named Charlie, told me it was found in a closed-down military archive, undelivered, marked "Return to Sender." He said my name was on it, written in a fading hand. When I touched it, my fingers trembled. My throat tightened. After all these years, why now? I turned it over and over in my hands, afraid to open it, afraid it would destroy what little piece I'd found, or worse, that it would awaken the girl I'd buried decades ago. Sometimes I think the cruelest part of love isn't the loss. It's the remembering. Before I tell you what was inside that letter, let me ask you something. Have you ever waited for someone who never came back? Tell me in the comments if you have. Tell me how long your heart waited before it finally gave up, because mine never really did. That night I placed the letter beside my bed. I didn't open it yet. I wanted to hear his voice in my dreams first. I wanted to remember him as he was, not as a ghost written on paper. And when I finally drifted into sleep, I dreamt of that day, the last day I saw him. He was standing by the train, his uniform too big, his smile nervous but proud. I'd given him a handkerchief embroidered with his initials. He tucked it into his pocket, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'll write, Songbird, I swear it." And then he left. And I never saw him again. Until now. Until this letter, this ghost from the past, this whisper from a grave I didn't even know how to visit. The morning light touched the letter again. I picked it up, took a deep breath, and broke the seal. Inside, the first line read, "My dearest Nokomis, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back." My heart stopped. And just like that, 40 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. I stared at those words until they blurred, the ink swimming in my tears. My hands trembled as if they no longer belonged to me. The paper was thin and fragile, like it had aged with me, like it had waited too long to be held. I could feel his presence in every curve of his handwriting, the way he pressed harder on my name, the way his S curled like a secret smile. For a moment, it felt like Samuel was right there, sitting beside me on that creaking wooden chair, whispering to me the way he used to. My dearest Nokomis, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. My breath caught again. I pressed the letter against my chest, my heart beating wild beneath it, as if it could somehow rewind time. He'd written it from the battlefield. I could smell the smoke in his words, feel the distance in the way his sentences broke. They told us to keep our letters short, said long ones get lost in the shuffle, but how do I fit a lifetime into a few lines, Songbird? I whispered his old nickname for me under my breath. Songbird. It felt strange and sacred, like speaking to a ghost. My lips quivered as I read on. I keep thinking about that morning at the train station, the way your eyes followed me until the train curved out of sight. I swore I'd come back to those eyes. But war changes everything. If I don't return, promise me you'll still sing. Promise me you'll live the way I loved you, loud and brave and with laughter that scares away the dark. I stopped there. My voice broke on the word laughter. I hadn't laughed in years, maybe decades. I'd forgotten what it even felt like. I read on through the tremor in my breath. There's something I need you to know, something I never had the courage to tell you before I left. The morning of my departure, the letter you gave me, I never got to keep it. It was taken from me by my commanding officer who thought it was a distraction. He made me tear it apart in front of him. But I remember every word, Nokomis, every word you wrote, and that's what's kept me alive this far. I closed my eyes and felt something old and raw open inside me. I'd written that letter the night before he left, pouring everything I was too shy to say aloud. I'd told him I wanted to grow old with him. I'd told him he was my forever, and I thought he never cared enough to keep it. But he had. He had. If you ever get this, I want you to know I tried, Songbird. I tried to come home. I tried to find you. But I've seen things here that don't leave a man whole. I'm afraid if I make it back, I won't be the same man you love. And I'd rather you remember me this way, young, smiling, full of plans. My hand clutched my chest. I could hear the rain starting outside, gentle against the window pane, the way it used to fall when we'd sit under the porch roof together. If I could have one more day, I'd spend it listening to you hum in the kitchen, the smell of coffee and cornbread around us. Tell your mother I'm sorry for breaking her daughter's heart. Tell her I tried not to. Tell her I loved you in silence every day since the first time I saw you by that river, barefoot, wild, and laughing at the sky. I couldn't breathe. I put the letter down, the paper trembling between my fingers. He remembered the river. I was 17 then. I'd slipped on the rocks and fallen in, and he'd pulled me out, laughing so hard that I forgot to be embarrassed. That was the first time he called me Songbird. Because I laughed like one, he said. For years I told myself he'd forgotten, that he'd chosen someone else, that I was just a foolish girl who loved too deeply. But now I knew he never stopped loving me. He just never came back. I looked down again. The ink had faded at the edges, but one line, one last piece, caught my eye. If someone else finds this letter before you do, please make sure it reaches her. She deserves to know I didn't forget. It was signed yours, forever, Samuel. The room felt colder. The sound of the rain grew heavier. I pressed the letter to my face and sobbed like a child, my whole body shaking from years of silence breaking all at once. 40 years I thought he'd abandoned me. 40 years of bitterness, loneliness, and empty Decembers, and all that time he'd been gone, Not by choice, not by cruelty, but by fate. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to that train station again and tell him not to go. To tell him that I didn't need him whole, I just needed him home. But time doesn't let you bargain. It just watches as you break. When I could finally breathe again, I folded the letter carefully, like something holy. I placed it back in the envelope, kissed it once, and whispered, "I kept my promise, Samuel." I waited. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt drenched in sorrow. I looked out the window and saw the old tracks, rusted and half buried under grass. That train station was gone now, replaced by weeds and ghosts. Still, I imagined him there, Samuel in his uniform, smiling, waving as the train pulled away. And this time I waved back. You know, people say time heals, but it doesn't. It just teaches you to live around the wound. I've lived a whole life around his absence, grew old waiting for a letter that came too late. And yet, somehow, I'm grateful, because at least now I know. At least now I can stop wondering why. But tell me, if you were in my place, would you rather have never known and kept your anger? Or would you rather learn the truth, even if it breaks your heart all over again? Because I'm still not sure which one hurts less. The morning after reading Samuel's letter, I woke up before the sun. My eyes felt heavy, swollen from crying through the night. The house was still, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when even the walls seem to be holding their breath. The letter lay on my nightstand, the envelope slightly torn at the edges, as if time itself had tried to eat it away. I reached for it again, running my fingers over his handwriting. It was all I had left of him now. For 40 years, I'd lived with bitterness. I'd cursed his name in whispers, told myself he didn't love me enough to return. And now I knew the truth, that he'd died trying to. That truth sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold. But one question wouldn't leave me. How did this letter find me now? It had been sent from a war I barely remembered the details of, from a man who died decades ago. Yet it showed up on my doorstep as if carried by a ghost. I needed to know who sent it, who found it, why it took this long. So I put on my shawl, the one Samuel once said made me look like autumn leaves, and I walked down to the post office in town. It was only a few blocks, but each step felt like I was walking through time. Past the bakery that used to sell our favorite sweetbread, past the park where he'd once carved our initials into an oak tree. Inside, the air smelled of paper and old wood. A young clerk, maybe in his 20s, looked up at me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" I placed the envelope gently on the counter. "This letter," I said softly. "It was delivered to me yesterday, but it's over 40 years old. I just need to know how it got here." He picked it up carefully, inspecting the faded postmark, his brow furrowed. "This is from 1945, he murmured. "I've never seen one this old actually delivered. Did it come with a return address?" I shook my head. "No, just his name, Samuel Gray. He was a soldier." The clerk hesitated. Then he said, "You might want to speak to the regional archive office. Sometimes when old mail is found in storage, in basements, or at decommissioned military depots, they send it to the last known address. It could have been lost in transit all this time." Lost in transit. That phrase lingered in my mind, like the letter, like Samuel, like all the years between us. lost in transit. I thanked the young man and took a seat by the window. My hands trembled as I stared outside at the falling leaves. Samuel had once promised we'd grow old together and watch the autumns come and go from our porch. And here I was, 76, sitting alone in a post office, still waiting for the man who never came back. Later that week, I made the trip to the archives. It was a long bus ride, hours through rolling plains and the last whispers of summer. The bus was nearly empty. I sat by the window, clutching the letter, watching the landscape change, the rust-colored fields, the old barns tilting into the earth, the silence of forgotten places. When I finally arrived, a kind woman with silver hair helped me. She searched through records, her fingers gliding over yellowed files and brittle papers. After what felt like forever, she looked up and said softly, "I found something." She handed me a file with Samuel's name on it. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were faded documents, military forms, casualty reports, a telegram sent to a family that no longer existed. But at the bottom, clipped to the last page, was another envelope, unopened, addressed to Nokomis Redbird. My heart stopped. It had never been sent. The woman said quietly, "We found a stack of unsent letters during a renovation of an old postal storage facility. Some of them dated back to the war. This one must have been misplaced, until someone decided to process them all recently." I nodded slowly, my fingers trembling as I held it. The paper felt even older, its edges brittle like ash. When I opened it, the world seemed to fall away. "My sweet songbird," it began. "If by some miracle this reaches you, then the world has been kind enough to let you know my last thoughts. We were ambushed last night. I'm writing this by candlelight. I can hear the guns outside, but all I can think about is you. You standing at the river with sunlight in your hair. If I don't make it home, please don't let them tell you I forgot you. I never forgot. You are the last thing I see when I close my eyes. The only peace I've ever known." The letter was smudged near the end. Blood, maybe, or rain. My chest tightened as I reached the final line. "They say heroes die for their country, but I think real heroes are the ones who wait. If love is what carries me through this, then you are my salvation. Yours, always, Samuel." I pressed the paper to my lips, shaking. My tears fell freely now, soaking the fragile ink. The woman at the desk looked at me with pity, but I wasn't crying for pity. I was crying for all the years I wasted hating him, for all the birthdays I spent pretending not to miss him, for the way I shut myself off from love, thinking he'd abandon me. He hadn't. He'd died loving me. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "Where is he buried?" The woman hesitated. "There's a list of soldiers buried in the memorial cemetery about 30 miles from here. I can help you find the section." 30 miles. After 40 years, 30 miles was all that stood between us. I took a bus again the next morning, letter in hand, the wind biting through my old shawl. The road wound through quiet hills until the rows of white stones appeared, stretching across the horizon like a sea of silence. I walked slowly through them, reading names until my eyes blurred. Each name was a story, each stone a final promise. And then, there it was, Samuel Gray, 1923, 1945. I knelt beside it, my knees aching, my heart both breaking and healing at once. I placed both letters on his grave, the one he sent and the one that never made it. "I kept my promise, Samuel," I whispered. I waited. The wind stirred, brushing my hair, carrying the faint scent of earth and wildflowers. I closed my eyes and imagined him standing behind me, smiling the way he did when we first met. For a brief, beautiful moment, I felt warm again. And then I said something I hadn't said in 40 years. "I forgive you." but maybe I was forgiving myself too. I sat there until sunset, the sky turning gold and violet, the world painted in the colors of memory. Tell me something. If you waited your whole life for someone who never came back, and then found out they never meant to leave, would that bring you peace, or would it break you all over again? Because I'm still not sure which one this is. The air that evening was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that follows truth, the kind that humbles you, softens you, and leaves you trembling at its mercy. I stayed by Samuel's grave until the last sliver of light melted into darkness. The cemetery grew cold, and the moon rose above the hills like a silver memory. I didn't want to leave him again. Not after finding him, not after 40 years of emptiness. But life, cruel as it is, never stops for the broken-hearted. It only pauses long enough to remind you that time will not wait, not even for grief. As I rose from the ground, brushing the soil from my skirt, I noticed a man standing a few rows away. He was middle-aged, wearing a worn brown coat, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His posture carried the kind of respect that comes from routine visits, the kind that speaks of love that never died. When he noticed me, he gave a polite nod. "Visiting someone special?" he asked, his voice gentle. I smiled faintly. "Yes, someone I once promised forever to." He looked at the stone before me and nodded again. "Samuel Gray," he murmured. "My grandfather spoke of him often, said he was the bravest man he ever knew." I froze. "Your grandfather knew him?" He smiled softly. "Yes, my name's Daniel. My grandfather, Thomas Gray, was Samuel's younger brother. He told me stories when I was a boy, about a woman Samuel loved, a woman he never stopped writing to." My breath caught in my throat. "Writing to?" Daniel nodded. "He sent letters home from the front, dozens of them. My grandfather kept them all in a small chest. But one letter, the most important one, he said was lost. He always believed it was meant for someone he never got to find. That's why before he passed, he made me promise to try and deliver it if it was ever found." Tears welled in my eyes as I whispered, "That letter found me. Yesterday." He looked at me in disbelief. "Then you're her," he said quietly. "You're Nokomis." Hearing my name from a stranger's lips, from someone connected to Samuel's blood, it felt like time folded in on itself. The world tilted, and I had to steady myself. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm Nokomis Redbird." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes warm and searching. "I can't believe this. He wrote about you in every letter, said you were the light that kept him alive. My grandfather said Samuel died whispering your name." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth, trying to keep the sob from escaping. After all these years, hearing that, it broke something open inside me. Daniel hesitated before speaking again. "If you'd like, I still have those letters. I think he'd want you to have them." It took me a moment to find my voice. "I would like that very much," I whispered. He smiled kindly. "I'll bring them tomorrow. I live nearby." When he left, I stood there a while longer, the cold wind threading through my hair. I stared at Samuel's grave, my heart swollen with something I hadn't felt in decades, gratitude. For all the pain, for all the waiting, I was grateful that love, somehow, had found its way home. The next day, Daniel came to my house with a small wooden box. It was old, the kind carved by hand, with initials burned into the top. SG inside were over 20 letters, tied with a faded ribbon. The paper had yellowed, the ink softened by time, but each letter felt alive. As I began reading, it was like Samuel's voice filled the room. "Dearest Nokomis," one began. "They say war changes a man, but it only made me more certain. I want nothing more than to come home and build that porch you always talk about, with a creaking swing and morning coffee. In another, I keep a photo of you in my pocket. The others tease me, say it's magic because I've survived every battle since carrying it. And another, when I close my eyes, I see the way your hands brush the flour off your dress when you bake. I swear the memory of you smells like bread and river water. By the time I finished the last one, I was shaking. My heart ached, but it was a sweet ache, the kind that reminded me love had once been real, pure, and mine. Daniel watched quietly. He never stopped loving you, Mrs. Redbird. I smiled faintly through tears. I know, and I never stopped loving him either. I just forgot how to admit it. We sat for a while in silence. The air smelled of cedar and old books. Then Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out one last thing, a photograph. It was Samuel, in uniform, smiling shyly, holding a small locket. He carried this with him, Daniel said softly. My grandfather found it among his things. It belonged to you, didn't it? I took it, my fingers trembling. Inside was a faded picture of me at 18 wearing a white ribbon in my hair, the same ribbon I'd worn the day Samuel promised to come back. I couldn't speak. All I could do was press that locket to my heart and close my eyes. When Daniel left, I sat by the window for hours. The sun dipped below the horizon, the room growing darker, until all I could see was the reflection of an old woman who had once been young and in love. I thought about how life is a strange thing, how it bends, breaks, and heals in ways you never expect. I thought about Samuel's letters traveling across time just to find me. And I wondered, maybe love doesn't die when the body does. Maybe it just waits, like I did. You know, my dear listener, if there's someone you love, truly love, don't wait for the perfect time to tell them. Time is not kind. It doesn't care about promises or plans. It just moves forward, and one day, all you'll have left is a story like mine, filled with what-ifs and could-have-beens. Do you believe love can reach us, even from beyond the grave? Because I think sometimes it does. The night ended with me sitting on my porch, the same creaking chair I'd once dreamed of sharing with him. The wind carried the scent of rain, and for a moment I could almost feel his hand brush mine. I whispered into the night, I got your letters, Samuel, every single one. The morning came soft and pale, with sunlight spilling through the lace curtains like melted gold. I hadn't slept. I sat in my rocking chair, Samuel's letters spread across the small table beside me. Every word, every faded line felt alive, like the whisper of a man who had refused to die in my heart. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry at the past. I wasn't bitter or lonely or haunted by what didn't happen. I was simply still. I think that's what forgiveness feels like. Not forgetting, not moving on, just breathing again after holding your breath for a lifetime. Later that day, I found myself walking to the edge of the meadow behind my house. The air was crisp. The earth smelled sweet, heavy with the promise of rain. I carried the wooden box of letters with me, the last physical piece of Samuel's soul that existed in this world. There's something about being old that makes you understand endings better than most. You learn that closure doesn't come from getting answers, but from learning how to live with the questions. Samuel and I never got our porch swing mornings or our late life laughter. But love had found its way through time to tell me I wasn't forgotten. At the old oak tree near the river, I stopped. Its trunk was thick and weathered, but if you looked closely, you could still see the faint marks where Samuel once carved our initials. S+N. I traced it with my fingers, tears filling my eyes. I opened the box one last time. The letters rustled gently in the wind. 40 years late, I whispered, but they made it home. I took a deep breath and began placing the letters into the hollow at the tree's base one by one. As I did, I spoke softly, to Samuel, to the river, to the wind. You were my first thought each morning, even when I pretended you weren't. You were every silence I couldn't explain. Every time I looked at the sky and felt something missing, you were it. When the last letter was tucked inside, I folded my hands and closed my eyes. The wind stirred and the branches creaked, a sound almost like laughter, gentle and warm. For a brief moment, I swore I could hear him say my name, and I smiled. That's when Daniel's truck pulled up. He waved from the distance, carrying something wrapped in cloth. "I thought you might want this," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a small wooden plaque, engraved with Samuel's name and a single line beneath it. "The heart remembers what time forgets." I felt my throat tighten. "It's perfect," I whispered. "I'll keep it here, with him." He smiled. He'd like that. We stood there together for a while, two strangers bound by a man who had lived and died long before either of us were ready to say goodbye. The river shimmered beside us, and I realized something. Samuel had always kept his promise. He'd said he'd come back to me one way or another, and he had. That night, back home, I lit a candle by the window and sat beside it with a warm blanket around my shoulders. I could almost see him there, sitting across from me, that same mischievous smile playing on his lips. "Do you remember," I whispered, "how you said the stars were God's way of keeping lovers connected?" I looked up through the window pane. "Well, Samuel, I've been looking at them for 40 years. I think I finally see you." The candle flickered just once, as if answering me. I smiled through the tears. "I'll see you soon, my love. But not yet. Not just yet." And for the first time in decades, I slept peacefully, his letters beside me, his memory no longer a wound, but a lullaby. You know, my dear listener, we all have someone we've lost, someone we still talk to in the quiet hours of the night. Maybe it's a lover, a friend, or a family member. But love doesn't vanish when a heartbeat stops. It lingers in the air we breathe, in the dreams we remember, in the moments that ache without reason. So tell me, have you ever held on to a love that time tried to erase? Have you ever felt their presence, even when logic told you it wasn't possible? If you have, that's how you know it was real. Because love that deep never truly ends. It just changes form. And before you go, my dear, if this story touched your heart even a little, promise me one thing. Take a moment today to tell someone you love them. Don't wait 40 years like I did. Don't let silence be the thing that lasts. If you felt something tonight, if Nokomis' story reached you, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tell me your story below. Your heart matters here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Beloved Grandma, where I'll keep sharing stories that remind you that even in heartbreak, there's beauty waiting to be found. Because in this little corner of the world, our stories, they never grow old. And in that quiet moment, I swear, the wind whispered back,